when a single dad of 6 jumped into a lake to save a drowning 7-year-old. He had no idea the child's father was the president of a Hells Angels chapter, or that this one act of heroism would completely transform his struggling family's life forever. What happened next defied every stereotype you've ever heard about motorcycle clubs and proved that family isn't always about blood. But how does a middle-class widower suddenly become brothers for life with one of the most feared motorcycle organizations in America? Let's start at where it all started. The summer heat shimmers off the asphalt like liquid mercury as the thunder of Harley-Davidson engines announces the arrival of the Devil's Canyon chapter. Their chrome and leather cutting through the peaceful lakeside morning like a blade through silk. Families with minivans and coolers instinctively create distance. Children press closer to parents as 23 motorcycles roar into formation near the boat ramp, their riders dismounting with the casual confidence of men who own whatever space they occupy. The scent of motor oil and cigarettes mingles with sunscreen and barbecue smoke, creating an atmosphere thick with unspoken tension and the promise of a day that will be anything but ordinary. Marcus Henderson wipes sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, the salt stinging a small cut from this morning's hurried shaving as he counts heads among the chaos of beach bags and inflatable toys and 6 children who seem to multiply in energy as the temperature rises. Emma grabbed Jakey before he runs into traffic. He calls to his 14-year-old daughter, watching her scoop up the 4-year-old, whose sticky fingers clutch a half-melted popsicle that's already staining his Finding Nemo swim shirt. The twins, Alex and Aiden, 8 years old and identical, except for a small scar above Alex's left eyebrow from last summer's bicycle accident, argue over who gets to carry the football, while Ben, 10 and serious beyond his years, helps their 6-year-old sister Mia adjust her floaties with the patience of someone who's learned too early that dad can't be everywhere at once. "Can we go to the deep part today, Dad?" Ben asks, squinting up through wire-rimmed glasses that make him look like a miniature professor. But Marcus shakes his head, the familiar weight of responsibility settling across his shoulders like an old backpack he can never set down. Since Sarah's accident 3 years ago, the screech of brakes and crumpling metal still echoing in his dreams. Every decision carries the weight of 6 lives, depending entirely on his judgment. And the lake stretches before them like a beautiful trap, its surface deceptively calm, while currents beneath could steal away everything he has left to lose. The morning sun climbs higher, turning the water into a mirror that reflects puffy clouds and the occasional pontoon boat loaded with college kids whose laughter carries across the water like music from another world. Marcus spreads their blanket on a patch of sand that offers clear sight lines to the water. Close enough to the lifeguard station to feel secure, but far enough from the motorcycle gathering to avoid any potential trouble. Though he notices how the bikers' children play in the shallows, just like his own, their fathers watching with the same protective vigilance that keeps Marcus scanning the beach every 30 seconds. "Dad, you're doing that thing again," Emma says, her voice carrying Sarah's gentle, teasing tone that makes his heart skip. And Marcus realizes he's been unconsciously counting heads, a habit born from nights when he'd wake in cold sweats, convinced one of them had simply vanished into the darkness that had already claimed their mother. The afternoon unfolds in the careful choreography of single parenthood. As Marcus applies sunscreen to squirming bodies that smell like chlorine and childhood, mediates disputes over sandcastle architecture with the diplomatic skills of a United Nations peacekeeper, and maintains his constant vigil over the water where his children splash and play with the fearless abandon he both envies and dreads. The twins have claimed a shallow area near the dock, their whoops of joy mixing with the gentle lapping of waves against weathered wooden posts, while Mia builds an elaborate sand fortress under Emma's watchful eye. Each tower and wall a small masterpiece that will disappear with the evening tide. "Stay where I can see you." Marcus calls for the 12th time, his voice carrying the edge of exhaustion that comes from 3 years of being both mother and father, referee and protector, breadwinner and bedtime story reader. The smell of grilling burgers drifts from a nearby family's portable grill, mixing with the scent of lake water and the coconut sunscreen that Emma insists smells better than the generic brand he usually buys. And for a moment, he allows himself to imagine Sarah beside him, her hand finding his, as they watch their children create memories in the space between water and shore. The Hells Angels have settled into their own family rhythm nearby, and Marcus notices with surprise how normal they seem when stripped of highway context. Fathers teaching sons to skip stones, mothers fussing over lunch preparations, teenagers rolling their eyes at parental warnings about swimming too far from shore. The club president, a mountain of a man whose gray-streaked beard and intricate tattoos tell stories Marcus can only imagine, sits in a lawn chair that cacks under his weight, his eyes tracking a sun-bleached boy of maybe 7, who darts between the adults like a minnow through reeds. "Tommy, stay close," the big man calls, his voice carrying an authority that makes even his fellow bikers straighten slightly. But children are children regardless of their father's reputations. And Tommy's attention has been captured by something near the rocky outcropping where older kids dare each other to jump from increasingly higher perches. Marcus watches the boy wander toward the deeper water with the casual inattention of a child who believes the world exists for his exploration and feels that familiar parental flutter of concern that every father knows the split-second calculation of distance danger and the time it would take to intervene. The sun beats down mercilessly, creating a shimmering heat haze that makes the far shore waver like a mirage. And Marcus wipes perspiration from his eyes just as the afternoon's lazy rhythm shatters like dropped glass. A child's scream cuts through the summer air, high and desperate, and unmistakably the sound of mortal terror coming from the direction of the rocks where Tommy had been exploring. And Marcus's blood turns to ice water as he sees the small form thrashing in water too deep for 7-year-old limbs, too far from shore for small lungs that are already fighting a losing battle against panic and the lake's deceptive currents. Time fractures into crystalline moments as Marcus's world narrows to a single point of focus. The drowning child whose small arms beat against water that might as well be concrete for all the purchase they find. His sun-bleached hair disappearing and reappearing above the surface, in a rhythm that speaks of seconds, not minutes before the lake claims another victim. The Hells Angels leader's roar of recognition cuts through the summer air like a chainsaw through silence. Tommy, torn from a throat that has commanded respect through force, but now breaks with the helplessness of any father. Watching his child slip toward death, his massive frame frozen by the terrible mathematics of distance and time, and the rocky shore that separates him from his drowning son. Without conscious decision, Marcus's body moves before his mind catches up, his sneakers hitting the water in a splash that sends droplets flying like scattered diamonds in the harsh sunlight. The cold shock of lake water driving the breath from his lungs as he plunges forward through the surprisingly strong current that tugs at his clothes with invisible fingers. His own children's voices fade behind him. Emma's scream of dad mixing with the twins' confused calls as muscle memory from high school swimming takes over. Each stroke a battle against water that seems determined to claim both rescuer and victim. His lungs burning as he fights through waves that taste of algae and fish and the metallic tang of his own fear. The boy is heavier than expected when Marcus finally reaches him. Tommy's body gone limp with the terrifying stillness of a child whose strength has been spent in futile struggle. His lips already tinged with the blue that speaks of oxygen-starved blood. And Marcus hooks one arm around the small chest while using the other to claw toward shore, with strokes that feel like swimming through molasses. The current fights him with every movement, trying to drag them both toward the deeper water, where the lake bottom drops away into darkness. And Marcus finds himself praying to a God he hasn't spoken to since Sarah's funeral, bargaining with whatever force might be listening that this child, someone else's son, someone else's everything, will not die in his arms. The swim back feels eternal and instantaneous, a paradox of time where each second stretches like taffy, while the shore seems to rush toward them with impossible speed. And Marcus emerges from the lake like some modern Lazarus, water streaming from his clothes in sheets as he carries Tommy's unconscious form toward the rocky beach where 23 Hells Angels have formed a circle, their leather-clad boat creating a wall of protection around the small drama of life and death. The club president drops to his knees with a sound like a building collapsing, his massive hands shaking as Marcus lays Tommy on the sun-warmed stones and begins CPR with movements that feel both foreign and familiar, pressing life back into lungs that refuse to respond, while the bikers around them maintain a silence so complete that even the lake seems to hold its breath. Tommy's first cough sends a lake water cascading from his mouth in a stream that carries with it the collective exhale of everyone watching. And when his eyes flutter open with the confused wonder of someone returning from a place no child should visit, his father's sob of relief echoes across the water like a hymn of gratitude that needs no church to contain it. The big man's tears fall onto his son's pale cheek as he gathers Tommy into arms that have known violence, but now tremble with the tenderness of almost loss. And when he looks up at Marcus through eyes red-rimmed with terror, transformed into gratitude, something passes between them that transcends the boundaries of social class, reputation, and the careful distances that separate different worlds. "Brother," he says, his voice rough as sandpaper and thick with emotion, "you saved my boy, and that makes you family, Angel. Family for always." And Marcus learns in that moment that AFFA is more than letters stitched onto leather. It's a covenant written in the shared understanding that some debts can never be repaid, only honored through a lifetime of loyalty that runs deeper than blood. The transformation begins before the lake water has dried on Marcus's clothes. As hands reach out to steady him, voices murmur, words of respect and acceptance, and the invisible barriers that had separated the Henderson family from the Devil's Canyon chapter dissolve like sugar in rain. Within the week, when Marcus's 15-year-old Honda refuses to start and he faces the impossible choice between car repairs and groceries for 6 growing children, 3 motorcycles appear in his driveway like mechanical angels, their riders carrying toolboxes and the kind of automotive knowledge that comes from lives spent maintaining machines that must never fail on dark highways. Emma's prom dress comes from hands more accustomed to throttles and brake levers than silk and satin as the club's old ladies' wives and girlfriends who've learned to love men whose loyalty is measured in miles ridden together. Take her shopping with the fierce maternal pride of women who understand that family extends far beyond genetics. When the twins face bullying at school from classmates who think their father is weak for crying at movies and baking cupcakes for class parties, word somehow spreads through channels. Marcus never fully understands that the Henderson children are protected, and the harassment stops with the abrupt finality of people who've glimpsed consequences they prefer not to test. Christmas arrives that year, preceded by the rumble of engines as motorcycles line Marcus' quiet suburban street, their riders carrying presents wrapped in newspaper and duct tape, but chosen with the careful attention of people who know the weight of gesture, who understand that love expresses itself not in expensive brands, but in the observation that Ben needs books about astronomy and Mia has outgrown her bicycle. Tommy, recovered and resilient in the way of children who bounce back from tragedy like rubber balls, becomes a fixture at their dinner table, teaching Marcus' youngest to fish, with the patient expertise of someone who's learned that water can give life as easily as it takes it away. Years flow past like the gentle current that nearly claimed 2 lives that summer day. And Marcus finds himself watching Tommy, now 15, and teaching 4-year-old Jakey to cast a line into the same lake where everything changed, and realizes that salvation is rarely a single event, but a continuous exchange. That in pulling one drowning boy from dark water, he had unknowingly rescued his own family from the isolation of grief and the suffocating weight of trying to be everything to everyone alone. As the sun sets over water that now holds memories of terror transformed into grace, he can hear Sarah's voice in the gentle lapping of waves against shore, telling him what she'd always known, and he'd finally learned to believe that he was stronger than he ever knew. Not because he could carry the weight of the world, but because he'd learned to let others help him bear.